Yeah, go crazy. Go crazy. Go crazy.
Wrong participle. Wrong
Yeah.
verb tense, Joel.
Verbs are
Just
always tense around Jewel. He's a man of action.
I'm
He's a
wrestling.
strutting stag of a man whose eyes burn like those of Wolverine.
I, I'm resident of Collinwood for YouTube. Joel Sage. This is my buddy Patrick McCray, my buddy Gordon Dymowski. We're here to discuss the movie Zelig, which is pretty interesting. It's a documentary comedy, which I watched again. I watched two different versions of this movie, but I'll go with the one Patrick sent us. I really like how they have the past, like the 40, like 30s, 40s, etc., and then they have the present day commentary in color to separate the difference of the people who were there. And I really smart idea. Even though this is a comedy and it's funny, and it comes across funny as well. I mean, it's very humorous. He's like, here's this guy who goes missing, and just, he goes missing. He goes
He
missing,
goes
and
missing.
then he he comes back, and he says he's a doctor or a psychologist, and then the girl's like, well, no, you're not, and then she tricks him. He's a who I have some questions. Who wrote this movie?
Yes. 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 I
Yeah,
couldn't agree more.
who wrote this movie, guys?
Who was what? I didn't hear any of that. I was
Oh, sorry.
trying to
Who
do
wrote
Bluetooth stuff.
this movie?
Sam Hall and Gordon Russell.
Sam Hall and Gordon Russell. No, Jewel, that didn't happen. It was Woody Allen. Woody, with the exception of Ants, and I think this movie that takes place in Beverly Hills with Bette Midler as his wife, I think. Woody has pretty much written all of his own stuff.
He now does he Here's a question. Did he initially, because he does put himself in his movies, did he initially write this with the idea of casting himself, or was there somebody else
I'm
in
sure he did. At the time, he was still as known as a comedian, a fixture of late night talk shows just 10 years before, etc., as being a writer director. And he at that point, I think maybe there was only one of his movies, Interiors, which was a drama that he had not appeared in.
Yeah, really interesting. I
and
like
and
how
of course Jewel, also I'll just he managed to handily win Best Picture out from under a little movie called Star Wars, and then refused to come get the Oscar. Instead, he was playing Dixieland Jazz that night. Unbelievable.
No,
either
that was
either
his excuse. He was actually seeing Star Wars.
I would love to think that were true also. I don't know what he would have made of Star Wars. So there's this force all around us. It binds us, it draws us together.
yeah. Woody Allen is a very interesting cat for sure. Very interesting writer, director, actor, comedian, if you will. I do like, again, I like how they do this movie. They do it as a documentary mixed with comedy. They do a really good job of switching back and forth. They give you enough of the black and white with, because there's moments there's not actual commentary. You're seeing the story unfold in front of you too. It's not just a bunch of people giving a bunch of commentary, which is good. You do want that from a standpoint, but when you in a documentary, when they're supposed to be commentary, it's there. So I love how they do it. They do it exactly right, how you should do a documentary, which isn't really a
Like the
documentary.
Colonel and Chicken. They did it
Yeah.
right.
What did so you guys said about this movie? sorry, Gordon, what did you think of this?
I did not like it.
Why?
Because I don't like Woody Allen. I thought this.
Okay.
I really thought this movie was. I didn't see the point other than here's some clever camera tricks that I can do. There was no kind of. It seemed like why are you focusing on this particular character other than. I know sometimes comedies don't need necessarily an overarching view or an ultimate goal. It just felt very pointless and needless. And plus, I think Woody Allen, he suffers from Charlie Chaplin syndrome in that a lot of his films tend to be about look at me, look at me, look at me, and not necessarily about the character. It feels very. If you had put another actor in this, I might have a different, as the lead, I might have a different perspective on it. And I know I'll probably be told about why maybe my opinion is less informed, but I really didn't care for it.
Less informed? What do you mean less informed?
Yeah.
It's sometimes easy when you like a film to, because you and Jewel did enjoy it. It's sometimes easy to dismiss someone not liking it as well. You haven't seen its entire oeuvre, or you're
No,
not giving it a chance.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that here. I think it sounds like you're relatively familiar with his oeuvre.
Right.
You know, with his, which is a word Jewel would use. I wouldn't. I would just say body of work. But if you say body, Jewel giggles. And body. It worked. It worked. You know, I think you're right on a lot of counts. Well, you're right on every count because your opinion. But I agree with you on a number of counts. You know, Woody Allen only really played one part.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you like that part, you'll like, you know, a lot of the things, chances are a lot of the things containing it. And it's either a part that you identify with or you don't. I've always identified with that sort of figure and with that sense of humor. So that's good. Yeah, I mean, in this case, you're going to watch Woody Allen transform into these figures who are unlikely, but they're even more unlikely when you can see it's Woody Allen underneath. And you know, in the days of, because I saw this movie when it came out, so that would have been 1984 or 85.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, long before Photoshop or morphing or any of that, it was pretty remarkable. But and some of it, you know, probably is problematic now. But at the time, we were not, you know, we were open-minded enough to not be closed-minded on you know, certain depictions, because it's very clear that he is making fun out of the idea of him appearing as all of these different types of people rather than making fun of those people, and he does a really good job of that. For me, the point of the movie and the thing that the conversations at the time were about, and sort of the instant metaphor aspect of the movie, was the desire of people to fit in and to do whatever they can in a group to fit in. And that, you know, overall, this is a sad practice. It's sad for everyone. It's sad for the person who feels like they have to be someone else to fit in. And it's kind of sad for the groups that can be so exclusive that they force people out because, you know, they lack some small qualifier. And so that's something that at the time the movie came out, I could identify with, and that I think a lot of viewers identified with. My mother, who is an English professor, a very bright woman, the minute he starts talking about his first transformation, which was into someone who had read Moby Dick. Oh my God. I saw it with her and some of her English professor buddies. They couldn't stop laughing because they had all been there. They all understood that. And so just that alone, that sort of, being an imposter, either to be liked or sometimes to not be noticed, was instantly identifiable. And then Alan builds on that, further and further and further out. And as our culture has kind of disintegrated into more and more factionalism, in some ways, I think the movie is more timely than ever. When race itself becomes elastic, and when gender becomes elastic, and so on and so forth, this idea of adopting new identities, changing your identity, maybe because it's who you truly feel like you are. Zelig doesn't do that, or just fit in, is a resonant one, and it's resonant for me. I think it's handled with a lot of wit, and I think the movie manages to have it both ways. I mean, clearly this is shown as inappropriate, and he is struggling to get over it, but still you have this wonderful slam bam action ending, with a Nazi aerial chase and all this other stuff, which is the ultimate in a happy ending, without really having to go there. So yeah, I mean, that's what we were responding to when the movie came out. That's what I still respond to when I watch it now.
I think too with certain aspects of this movie, what they do really well is to me the question this movie poses too is Woody Allen's character doing it on purpose, or is he not? I think, and to a degree, is that funny? Yeah, it is, because they're going, you get people going, oh, I think we spotted them here. I think we spotted them here. And it's like, they arrest a guy, and it is him, and then there's somebody that isn't him. It's like,
it's a great, the movie is a great practical joke also.
Yeah.
Because to me, a great practical joke is one where even when you know that it's fake,
yeah,
it's so detailed. It's so well done. And in this case, the level of detail is what makes it so believable. The novelty songs, the film that was shot about his life at the time that is so exact. Even the line deliveries of the people in the newsreel footage who have this sort of slightly stilted, I wish I could be like Leonard Zelig and change my identity all the time, and perhaps one day my dream will come true. That kind of machine gun like delivery that one guy has, it is so studied, but it doesn't feel like it's an effort. And that's the other thing that I really, really, really love about this film, is that if you want to educate someone about, I think, pop culture of the 20s, there are a lot of worse ways to do it than this, as long as you remind them the main character is completely fictitious, but it gets the feel of that era and of that time period, I think, right. And the other thing, and this is just one of those brilliant aspects of, the more the more there is to laugh at, that Woody was able to get people like Susan Sontag and Saul Bellow in on the practical joke, that he was able to get them with a straight face to lend credibility to this. This was before the big mockumentary boom. I think it was made either concurrently or right on the heels of This Is Spinal Tap, which was made right on the heels of This Is the Ruddles. I think that
Ruddles was, I think, 79, 78,
okay, so
79.
yeah, so it was Ruddles, this and Spinal Tap around the same time. really inventing what became a very common genre, and a genre that would subsume one of the most successful television series of the past 30 years, The Office. Yeah.
Is there something you liked about it, Gordon, or at all?
No, I mean, I don't mean to be Debbie Downer, but it's
That's
just,
okay.
it's just wasn't something that appealed to me.
That's interesting because Alan is such a he's such a cornerstone of an entire generation's humor. What is the where do you think the spark doesn't arc? I mean, because I think it's useful to talk about when something's funny, and I think it's useful to talk about when something isn't funny. And
Well,
and
there are
yeah,
there are one or two moments that I chuckled at. I mean, one was the joke about he played a rabbi so well that the French sent him on a one-way ticket to Devil's Island or something like that. And you have to know
even
your
if it's
French.
not a joke, it's a great joke.
Yeah. And then there's one where you see Hitler doing it, being a crazy, and you see out in the corner kind of going, trying to get someone's attention. Like, I think.
Even when they interview the old Nazi, and he says, "Oh, the Fuhrer is very upset." He had a joke about Poland. He was getting ready to do, and Zelig ruined it.
I think where it, for me, where it kind of didn't gel was the psychiatrist scenes where he's going in therapy, and it feels less like there's an effort to figure out who this guy is, and more like Alan said, "Oh, okay, I've got these old jokes from my stand-up routine, so I'm gonna just throw them in." I mean, and I think Alan, overall as a filmmaker, he has a very particular vibe, and the vibe just doesn't gel with me.
And it never has. Is that that's been a lifelong antipathy?
I saw many of his films when I was younger, and they were okay. I mean, it wasn't like, oh my God, Woody Allen, we need to burn all his films yesterday. But it just never quite appealed to me.
That's interesting. I'll ask you very straight. Do you think that is a product of sort of Chicago Catholic culture, which has its very specific vibe, as we can see in the first years of Saturday Night Live, where it really, that kind of cultural voice ruled it in a lot of ways. And Woody, who is, a Jewish man from New York, that these are two very, very, very different ways of looking at the universe.
No, because
Okay.
Mel Brooks comes from a similar background, and I find him incredibly funny.
What would you say the differences are between their senses of humor? I mean, obviously one's funny and one isn't to you, but beyond that, how would you break that down?
I think that Brooks is much more. He has much more of an edge to him than Woody Allen. He has much more of a. When you look at even just the ideas that he's done, two producers decide to put on a show that'll deliberately bomb to make money. A black sheriff, a town hires a sheriff not knowing he's black. Frankenstein's grandson decides to revitalize his grandfather's work after denying that he's, he keeps saying there's Frankenstein. There's a willingness to kind of push the boundary and to kind of go against the grain. Whereas with Alan, it seems like it's more about it's more kind of a look how quirky I am. Look how look how these things bother me, and I don't know why they bother me, and it feels very self-absorbed.
Yeah, well, it totally is. Yeah, for me, I never got to look how quirky I am. I always got a look how square and hypocritical WASP society is. and look how I'm actually telling the truth about at least how I and other people who identify with him, there's a lot of people, sort of get through life.
And I would say that George Carlin does that whole look at how hypocritical WASP society is much better than Allen did.
Certainly it's much more political. It's not as personal. Allen, comes back to individuals and relationships, whereas Mel is doing genre parodies,
Mm-hmm.
and Carlin is doing extremely political work where he's taking on society as a whole. What Allen's doing is he's taking on the hypocritical patterns with which people interact and what they hold up. I mean, and that takes us all the way to Seinfeld. And and there are people who get Seinfeld and there are people who don't. And I would say that the people who don't are actually the bad guys in Seinfeld, because the heroes in Seinfeld, because Seinfeld's a very Woody Allen-ish show.
Well, that's part of why
And
I've never liked Seinfeld either.
yeah, and and the thing about Seinfeld is that it's about the real rules that govern interaction, and the real rules that govern social interaction, and those who recognize that those rules are full of bull feathers and so have to work their way around them but not get caught, and then everyone else who accepts them as true and who just accepts them as at face value. And and for me that often ties into Dark Shadows, and I wrote about that in the day book, that that often the heroes in Dark Shadows are having to weave in and around pardon me um and everyone else who expects them to sort of behave themselves. And it's they're just as revolutionary as Brooks, and they're just as revolutionary as Carlin, but it's all on an interpersonal level. And either you're part of the resistance or you're not. And I don't want to simplify it that much, but it's one of those things that you've either lived and experienced and you go, oh my God. Oh yeah, because I mean, this is a problem Larry David had when he was first, writing Seinfeld. Jason Alexander would go up to him and say, "Larry, no one would ever do this or that or the other thing," and Larry would say, "I did." And in fact, I think on with Seinfeld and sometimes even Woody Allen, it's this effort to not look quirky, but to have natural human instincts that other people label as quirks, that you're trying to hide, that you're trying to conceal, but eventually come out, you find yourself judged. And it's like, oh yeah, okay, back to the drawing board.
Did you ever hear the story of in Seinfeld where the girl who played Elaine became pregnant a second time, and Larry David's idea was, well, let's just say Elaine is getting fat, and the girl who played Elaine, she started crying.
Did he say that?
That was his idea. He goes, well, let's just say she's getting fat. Now they didn't use that idea, but
well, that certainly holds up Larry David exactly the way I was hoping this conversation would. Now I proudly claim him. Oh, good God, Jewel. I don't know that I would like to hear the whole story on that, but pregnancy in television has been long a contentious item, and in that era, which I hate saying that something that feels so recent was in that era, but in that era, yeah, pregnancy, and out of wedlock pregnancy was still a big deal. Now it's I won't say it's becoming the norm, but it is a very accepted social choice. So now they can get away with a pregnant Elaine, and it would probably be the focus of several seasons. But then again, it would have made the show very sentimental and baby centric, and that's not something Larry David wanted to do.
Yeah. I do think because I do remember watching television throughout the 90s, and pregnancy was a very taboo thing on television. They didn't like show it a bunch of times, and when they did, it was usually a man and wife, having a child, et cetera, et cetera. And usually,
Which is ironic, considering the ratings that Little Ricky got on I Love Lucy. I mean, tens of millions of people around the country hanging on that pregnancy, and on the birth of Little Ricky, and
yeah, I do remember that the one I remember most about that was actually shown where an actress had gotten pregnant in real life, and they wrote the pregnancy in on the show was Stargate Atlantis. I'm sure that's not the only one, but that's the
Star
one.
Trek Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, that's the one I remember most, and it's like, well, now the character on the show did have, I think, a husband or boyfriend or something, so that made sense.
Well, when Michael Dorn got pregnant with Armin Shimmerman's child, that was a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I will say that, like, directors who put themselves in front of the camera, is it ballsy? Sure. But as somebody who's seen it a bunch of times too, does it get annoying? Sure. But I also think,
well, don't go see those movies.
No, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I also think it's circumstantial too. Like, I'll give a great example. The Man with No Face that starred Mel Gibson. He was
Man with No Face that starred Mel Gibson.
Yeah, he plays a priest in it. Go watch it.
Okay.
He did not write that role for himself. He wrote it with in mind of casting another actor, and he actually pitched it to a bunch of different actors, and they all turned him down. And he said he literally had no one else, and he said, "Fuck it, I'll do it," because he had nowhere else to go. Mm-hmm. And I do think there's a difference between having nowhere else to go and putting yourself in front of the camera to get yourself over instead of giving the material to somebody else.
It worked for Orson Welles.
It did.
And as Woody aged, he did start giving it to other people and basically had them do Woody Allen impressions.
Yeah, and I think that, to go to Joel's discussion of Mel Gibson and your point about Orson Welles, there were times where they didn't go in front of the camera, but they knew it because of the story. I mean, Mel Gibson, it's like Mel Gibson didn't cast himself as Pontius Pilate in The Passion of the Christ.
Sure.
I don't know because I never saw that film, but,
funny movie. Still is funny, talking about the great comedies. That's one of them.
And, Wells was known for like, hey, look, he took on commercials so that he could get his quirky art films done.
Well, yeah, but by that point, he was the size of a major home appliance. I mean, he was not able to portray the range of type characters that he just portrays in Citizen Kane, as Kane. I mean, at that point, he was wheelchair bound.
But you could also, but at the same time, they knew when to take their ego out of it. That maybe they wrote a script, they're going to direct it, but maybe they're not the best person for this particular role.
Starting in the late 70s, I think, with Interiors, which Woody does not appear in. It's a drama. It's a very Bergman-like drama. Woody does not appear in that. And even in the period that this film kind of initiated, which includes Broadway Danny Rose and Hannah and Her Sisters, one of the most successful of those films, Woody doesn't appear in, which is Purple Rose of Cairo. And so there was a phenomenon for quite a while of, it's a Woody Allen movie without Woody Allen. And then he made thrillers like Match Point with Scarlett Johansson. He's not in that. So he took himself out of the equation with I think refreshing frequency.
But we're talking about Zelig, and I just don't think he works in this role. I wonder what the point of this movie is. With being there, you could argue that the greater point is it's about how people in specific social situations will make assumptions about what people say, regardless of knowing their background. That's one lesson.
Yeah.
Another is, if you look at every other scene, there's like a TV going on. You see cuts to static, voiceovers. So you can talk about how the media affects people. Here,
Sure.
I'm watching this and it's like, it's not even like a relatively straightforward, meant to be a laugh. I wonder what the point of this movie was, other than, hey, look, I can do this cool thing with cameras.
Well, okay, it's for one, though, it was airbrushing, really. It's the inverse of being there. For one thing, the media has a huge role in this movie. I mean, it's constantly coming back to newsreels and popular songs and depictions and toys and depictions of Zelig in the time that Zelig was like a Chauncey Gardiner in a sense of, what if a Chauncey Gardiner really caught on, you know? And Leonard Zelig is indifferent to this. He's making no money off these things. In fact, I think he gets in a lawsuit about it at one point. And in being there, you have a guy who the crowd will kind of conform around him and hold him up as a great genius when he has no idea. In Zelig, it's about what one person will do to assimilate. Yeah, his movie, I mean, it's heavily about the Jewish desire to assimilate into any other culture. You very few films deal with the alienness of that Jewish experience in the early part of the 20th century, and it's an alienness that, even if you're not Jewish, if you feel marginalized, you can appreciate. And so for me, it does not challenge so much as it kind of affirms. And what it affirms is that, hey, if you've ever felt the urge to be something you're not, just to not get attention, just to blend in, just to assimilate, which I have many times, you will, you will or may identify with this film and find a lot of meaning and a lot of resonance in it.
I think that too. Like, I don't. How familiar are you guys with the DB Cooper thing?
Fairly familiar. In fact, I think there was just some new piece of evidence, or your kid loves it. Some new piece of evidence or something that pertains to the DB Cooper case, I think.
Yeah, I think they found some. I'm not sure if it was like a piece of like clothing or if it was like remains, but they did actually find some something to suggest what happened after the flight.
I bring that up because I feel like Alan's character is a bit Cooperish in a way. I'm not saying he is trying to be DB Cooper.
They both do an aerial stunt.
He does. He does. Flies the plane upside down all the way across the Atlantic.
Yeah. Which I is great. Wow, what an action ending. As I was watching this movie, I kept wondering what a modern day movie, that talks about, the Leonard Zelig phenomenon would be like. What would the, oh God forbid, can you imagine the Zack Snyder version of Zelig?
That's probably the only way, in my opinion, you could improve this movie. Have Zack Snyder direct it. And I don't like Zack Snyder.
Yeah.
Like, I would never say, like, you know what? Zack Snyder should direct a Halloween movie. Because that's an insult to the Halloween franchise. And right now, Zack Snyder's done like a 4-hour Star Wars without with the serial numbers filed off. I mean, what's next? I'm going to say this out loud, and I know I'm going to get venom from at least two people in this Skype room. Zack Snyder's Dark Shadows.
It would have been better. I think it would have been a lot better than Tim Burton's Dark Shadows. I mean, I would be willing to see that. Yeah, I mean, sure.
If he
Sure.
does, if you quit moving these pills around.
Oh, sorry.
Because I can't find what the hell I'm looking for.
Sorry. I've given up on Zack Snyder, and anything Zack Snyder would show, I probably wouldn't watch it.
You would not.
No. I mean,
see, I will say this for Zack Snyder. I think Zack Snyder's for movies the same way Rob Liefeld is for comics. He's good at the power shot.
yeah.
He's good at the one moment where you go, yes, that's it. It's powerful. It's evocative. But he doesn't know how to string those power shots in with decent storytelling in between.
that right there, what you just described, is my exact issue with him, because okay, he remade, what was it, Dawn of the Dead, okay, and good, he's good with a camera, but his storytelling starts off okay, but then it varies. It's like, well, wait, like, I really, as a storyteller, I don't love Zack Snyder. I don't hate him. I probably wouldn't. Would I watch another one of his movies? No, because I sat through Batman versus Superman. I'm just like, please end this movie now. And I said that in the first 10 minutes the movie was running. I just think the 3-hour movies, I don't want to see a bunch of 3-hour movies. Like, there's a reason I love most of the Halloween movies. Number one, they're short. They're not overly long. And two, they're entertaining as hell. No matter what, whether you hate the actual plot of the movies, they're all entertaining. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, H2O, Resurrection, they're all entertaining as hell.
And hearing you speak, I just realized what would have made Zelig better: zombies.
There you go. That would have been interesting. Oh my god. Now, we talked about Woody Allen being in this movie. Who would you have put in this movie, Gordon?
I'm trying to think of actors. I might have put in someone, and thinking of the time, and who might have been. I could see if you put someone in like Jeff Goldblum, Peter Weller, someone who could be an analog to Woody Allen without actually being Woody Allen. Let's see, and I'm just trying to think, because there's like, right now I've got Buckaroo Banzai on the brain, so I don't want to necessarily. I think. And right now I'm drawing a blank, but I think that it's also one of my issues with Woody Allen movies, that so a lot of his lead characters, when he's playing them, have so much of his identity in them that it's kind of like, okay, you don't necessarily, it's hard to think of who you would replace it with, simply because it just feels like he's like Chaplin. He kind of decides, okay, this is my movie, rather than let the movie kind of be itself.
Yeah. I know he's not exactly Woody Allen-esque, but I might have put Bruce Willis in this movie.
You know, I'm not sure if he was acting at this time, but a very young Bruce Willis would have worked.
Yeah. I mean, he did comedy before doing that.
Oh, I grew up on moonlighting.
Yeah.
Do bears bear?
I'm,
Do bees
I'm
bee?
having a I'm having a hard time finding a lot of negative reviews. Gene Siskel was not big on it. Roger was. So looking at your Chicago friends. The other the other major negative review that I found was Pauline Kael, who wrote The Film Was Over. She said, I felt good, but I was still a little hungry for a movie. There's a reason Zelig seems small. There aren't any characters in it, not even Zelig. There's interesting takes. Variety said the film was, I know I'm appealing to authority here, so forgive me. Vincent Canby, Allen's new remarkably self-assured comedy is to his career what something I can't pronounce is to Fassbender. Fanny and Alexander is to Ingmar Bergman's work. Zelig is not only pricelessly funny, it's also on occasion very moving. It works simultaneously as social history, love story, and examination of several different kinds of film narrative, as satire and as parody. It is a nearly perfect and perfectly original Woody Allen comedy. Variety said it's consistently funny, though more academic than Boulevardier, so that would, have the Mel Brooks division. Christian Science Monitor called it amazingly funny and poignant. Time Out described it as a strong contender for Allen's most fascinating film, while TV Guide said Allen's ongoing struggles with psychoanalysis and his Jewish identity, stridently literal preoccupations in most of his work, are for once rendered allegorically. The result is deeply satisfying. So yeah, it has it certainly has its defenders. Kayla Marsh of Slant Magazine wrote, "We're infinitely pliable. That's the thesis of Zelig, Allen's wisest film, which has much to say about the way a person can be bent and contorted in the name of acceptance. Its ostensibly wacky conceit is grounded in an emotional and psychological reality all too familiar to shrug off as farce. We'll go very far out of our way to avoid conflict. Zelig seizes on that weakness and forces us to recognize it." And you are a guy who's comfortable with conflict. Your humor often comes out of the generation of faux conflict, and that is an instinctive language for you. Not that you're a disputatious man. You're not. You're extremely agreeable and reasonable, but you find humor in the notion of confrontation and the bluntness of it. And and instinctively, Alan is all about avoiding that. And I myself am largely about avoiding it, unless I can go to Wikipedia and find a bunch of critics to back me up. So I think that alone, just what will people do to avoid conflict, is something very deep at the heart of this film. His dedication to cowardice can be seen just beautifully in something like Bananas or Love and Death, where he's forced into the army. A couple of films in which he's conscribed into the army, and he has no place there at all whatsoever.
What do you guys give this movie? Scale of 1 to 10.
I'll give it a 4.
That's more than I thought. That's okay. That's pretty good. I give it a 10. I think it's one of the most original, interesting, and touching comedies I think I've ever seen.
It's a good comedy, but it's a good mockumentary. They call it a documentary, but that's what it is. It's a mockumentary.
It was one of the first. It was one of those first mockumentaries.
I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. The only thing I didn't like about this movie, this movie is I wish they would have had is the end. I wish the end, they would have had Woody, like an aged Woody Allen. It was all worth it. And just like
He does. I mean, he does have some quotes, at the end of the movie, and it has stuff about his life with Dr. Fletcher.
Yeah.
So you get a little of that, but here's the thing, that would have been a very Hollywood moment.
Yeah.
And this, true to a often documentaries don't have satisfying, denouement,
Right.
because there's no nouement today.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's often great stories just kind of fizzle out.
Yeah, and I'm surprised he didn't use that song. Yes, we have no nouveau. We have no nouveau today.
Every day a little nouveau. On a clear day, nouveau forever.
Guys, is there anything you want to add about Zelig before we go?
No, it's at the very least it's an interesting movie, and you're not going to see, certainly. I mean, Gordon, Jesus Christ, given the state of cinema now, you're not going to see anything this original anytime soon. And that's the experience. Again, I keep coming back to it. I had with Brainstorm the other day. I'm just consistently reminded of, whether they were hits or misses with an individual, how brave and original movies could be, even up through the 90s and the early aughts. And I let's say I didn't like Zelig, I would kill for a Zelig I didn't like to come out now, just to have a good reason to go to the theaters. And this was a major release. This was as big as anything today.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of it is that I think around the 2000s, you saw the emergence of companies realizing, hey, we've got this intellectual property. We've got this thing that we can exploit. You also have more business influence in Hollywood, where it's no longer let's do a James Bond film because James Bond films make money, or because James Bond films are what, we can write a really creative one. It's basically James Bond's the IP. We know it'll print off money, and so let's do it.
Yeah, but there's an added element to it. Right. And I mean, I hate to throw a red pill in here because that's not me. But not only what intellectual property can we get and just slap out there, but what incongruous political message can we shove into it, I guess, to somehow justify it.
Well, that also happened right after 9/11, because it started leaning in that way, and then it became kind of this
an election of Donald Trump. Pow.
Yeah, and to kind of split the difference, I do think we need more diverse voices creating and writing films. I think, let me use an example of what I know. That's probably not what you're thinking of, Patrick, of how politics is shoved into movies inappropriately, which is
because you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
so
the Purge franchise.
Yeah,
because the first movie is a nice little thriller with an interesting sci-fi backdrop. When you watch the further movies, this is what a relatively wealthy director in Los Angeles thinks social justice is about, and it's a real weird mix.
Well, I mean, in what way? Because the social justice warriors are the good guys in the Purge movies. They're not the ones out killing people. That's the red hat types.
If you've ever seen, but it's still the kind of Hollywood version of social justice. It's not the without there's a whole rabbit hole you can get into. But simply
not when my bladder is this full.
There is a huge difference between let me. Well, since Patrick's off, he'll avoid the lecture.
No, I'm
but,
still here. I'm still here. I'm just sparing you a few sound effects.
Oh, okay, but a lot of the things we're dealing with now, a lot of those conversations started years ago, and we had a whole big chunk of time where we were all upset. When 9/11 happened, the rule book went out the window. We're seeing a little bit of that, more of that with what happened on October 7th. It is easy to think, well, why why is it we're worrying about all this stuff? Why are we throwing in these gratuitous messages, diversity, blah, 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 blah. It's because we've had a delay in dealing with this stuff. And I think right now, in my opinion, and this is strictly my opinion, I think that a lot of it is Hollywood is trying to catch up rather than doing what they should have been doing, which is fostering these, this kind of range of diversity and these kind of social justice messages from the beginning. And I know that as soon as I say that, there'll be all sorts of venomous comments, but I deal with this with a Doctor Who meetup where people will complain, okay, and the word is woke. And we all know the kind of buzzwords. If the audience for any given piece of art is much wider than we can imagine, I think there's a lot of fewer missteps in doing right now that are coming out. And I think it's kind of I don't see it as pandering in that South Park way. I think it's just more like, it's like become like, okay, well, if the kids are into cell phones, we'll give them cell phones. Now it's, if the kids are into this, and there's also a lot of micro programming where it used to be you do a show for a very specific audience or a very specific, demographic. Now it's become super segmented. So it's no longer just it appeals to men. It appeals to men, or it appeals to men 18 to 35. Now it's men 18 to 35 who smoke cigars and watch YouTube and do strange things with AI in their spare time. Like, it's down to that level.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. My first question would be, who's the audience, and is it an audience that universally wants what they're being given with the same nature and with the same kind of treatment and verve that Hollywood is providing it? I think that's the first
Right.
That's the first question. And so here's a piece of here's to me one of my favorite Exhibit A's, and that has to do with the trans characters on Star Trek Discovery, who I feel, in the casting of the original series and in some subsequent series, and even in Strange New Worlds, I feel like, a good character who had an important function on the ship, because in a ship everything has a function, was initially what was created. And then the thought was, what if we can have some representation in the casting and then in how the character is built? And when I think the characters Adira and Gray were brought into Star Trek Discovery, I feel like they were brought into Discovery to represent. And some people would say, hey, look, that is the function, and great, because it is necessary. As someone who is not being represented in that, it's not my job to say whether or not that really works or not. I know that as a storytelling function, it feels clumsy. it's like when I watch those characters on Discovery, I keep thinking, no, wait, what are they doing? What? And I could never really zero in on that. And it's that kind of approach that seems just ham-handed. And the other thing that I personally have trouble with is when inclusion comes at the expense of other groups. And I know that inclusion and exclusion has been all about the elevating of certain groups for decades, centuries. I totally get that. But that doesn't make it right in the healing process, I think. And that irks me. And I having not grown up in the 1930s or 20s or whenever Indiana Jones grew up, and I guess he was an adult in the 30s. I can't really say whether or not, oh boy, I sure feel, I didn't grow up then, but I enjoyed those movies. And that may be a thin analogy, but I know lots of people who enjoy those. And I enjoyed Dial of Destiny. In fact, I enjoyed it a lot. I know a lot of people who didn't need that, who, that expressly was not why they were going to the theater. And this was not a bunch of angry basement dwelling, white men. So I think it's an important case of picking your battles. So when they were talking about Michael B. Jordan playing Superman, I thought fantastic, absolutely great, because I mean, what was Superman but this golem, and invented by these two Jewish boys to masquerade in Goyish society and be a protector, down to the name Kal-El. What it's Temple Kal-El. I mean, it's remarkable. And so, Michael B. Jordan kind of representing that alienness to what we think of as, white society, and which Superman also was, the original Kal-El also was. I think a masterstroke. I think it is great. So, and to a number of characters, it's irrelevant. And if it makes like in the case of Michael B. Jordan, if it makes a real political difference, do it. Especially if it helps the story, because Superman's a very political story. It's just that isn't quite as evident for contemporary audiences. So in fact, Jordan as Superman might actually be a truer Superman than we're going to get with whoever's the latest guy playing it, Dean Cain or whoever they're getting. I can't keep up.
Very, very interesting. Is there anything you want to add, guys, about the movie before we go?
It's a bold movie. Talking about a movie, it's all about assimilation.
Still don't like it.
You don't have to.
No, nobody has. That's the thing. Nobody has to like a movie. Trust me, I hate Halloween Ends, and I'm a Halloween fan. But
that's because you like Halloween. You don't want it to end. Why do they call it November 1st? They didn't make a Halloween movie called November 1st, which is Devil's Rejects.
Jewel, I have a hypothetical question.
Sure.
Okay, if somebody locked you in the room,
okay,
and said you'll never leave this room, but you'll be fed. This is your and you get your choice of punishment of a movie you see all the time. No other choices. Your only choices are Halloween Ends or the Tim Burton Dark Shadows. What are you choosing to see?
Oh, throw in Beyond the Valley of the Dolls.
I'm going to watch the Tim Burton Dark Shadows movie. I would.
Why is that?
Because at least I can look at that and be somewhat entertained outside of Halloween Ends. Here's
Well, Dark
Here's
Shadows is a
Halloween-
true story.
Here's Halloween Ends' biggest issue. Halloween Ends' biggest issue isn't Corey Cunningham. Halloween Ends' biggest
It's
issue
about
is
time someone said it.
the fact that their killer, Michael Audrey Myers, unleashed unleashed evil within Corey Cunningham. Here's the problem with that. In the previous two movies, they didn't say he was able to do that. This is a 3-film set, and anybody's weak ass defense of this is, well, just pretend like it's a separate thing. No,
Defend
why
it.
don't you go straight to hell, and then we'll talk about see if it's a separate thing, okay?
I'll defend Zelig. I'm not going to defend that.
So Jewel, what you're saying is, if we were to imprison Patrick that way, we don't give him a choice. We just show him Halloween Ends on a constant cycle.
Which I've never seen. Is that the most recent one?
Yeah.
But it didn't end. Aren't they making another one?
They are.
Bunch of liars.
It's not going to be a continuation of David Gordon Green's trilogy.
David Gordon Green trilogy. We're really dignifying it with these phrases.
They're going to mash it up with the Purge. So it's like on Purge night, Michael Myers comes out, and you got to run away with it from him.
I'd watch that movie.
I'd watch that movie.
The last Purge, which I had to see, I was made to see, because I had sworn off them. I got my walking out of movies career really started around Purge 2, where I got about a reel in, and I thought, oh, it's this. Why am I surprised? And I went and sat in the lobby and wrote about Quentin Collins for a couple hours while I waited for people to come out. The most recent one, I'll give the Purge movies this. They are on a wider and wider canvas, as unlikely as it is. You know, they paint these things on a wider and wider canvas. The author and the director wrote one of the best horror stories I've ever read, which is at the end of the first Blumhouse horror anthology collection, which I think is called Procedural. Holy Christ, is this a great story? Wow. But beyond that, he's not filming Procedural, he's filming Purge. They are really interesting ways to have important conversations with Trump fans, because Trump fans love this movie. They love these movies. And they say, you know, I think we're headed towards that. And I say, it sounds like you want that. Is that what you want? Oh, no, I didn't say that. Oh. It's like, well, yeah, but you think we're headed towards it? Yeah. Well, why are you voting for an intentionally divisive, racially inciting individual who seems to be all about shoot first, ask questions later, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But at least they had to think about it. And I value the Purge films for shoving politics in their face in a way that they'll watch, and in a way that may give a few of them a second thought.
Guys, this was a lot of fun. What do you want to do next?
Gordon, what do you want to do?
Well, I had an idea. And it's something I know the two of you have talked about, but I don't think all three of us have ever talked about. The Dark Shadows 2004 pilot.
Yeah.
I would be happy to talk about that again.
Yeah.
Because I have thoughts about that as well.
The best final shot of any Dark Shadows production ever.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But everything up to it's pretty good. I really like a lot of the choices they make.
Well, I don't hate it, but but I think we can talk about it at our next.
Yeah.
But I think my qualifier would be because it's incomplete and it's a pilot.
Yeah.
I think a lot of what I find wrong with it would either because there aren't scenes that would fill that in, or they would probably remount the pilot if it had gone to series.
I agree. And it's ironic, Gordon. One of the things I like about it is the fact that it has so much left to develop. My imagination fills in where it would have gone. So, I mean, is that really am I appreciating a pilot, or am I appreciating the series I imagine the pilot would have led to?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something me and Patrick had talked about too, is that we were more appreciating where this could have gone. And
Well,
we
let's
could
talk about it.
we'll talk about it again. When do you want to do this? Tomorrow or Sunday?
On whenever you like.
Gordon?
I'm open as well.
How's tomorrow night, 10:30?
That'll
Sounds
work.
terrific.
I gotta go rewatch the 2004 on air Dark Shadows pilot because it's a lot of fun to watch. Guys, not only watch that, watch Michael Myers' Absolute Evil. You'll enjoy it.
I will.
Will do.
I just rewatched Batman Dead End.
I watched that actually.
What'd you think?
Really good. Really good costume
Right.
design too, by the way.
Did they get everything right?
Yeah, they did really good. For a short film, really, really good. Links to Gordon Dymowski's Amazon page is going to be in the description box. Links to Patrick McCray's Dark Shadows Daybook and Bow is going to be in the description box. I will see you gentlemen tomorrow night.